Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Once again, Happy New Year. And wherever you are in this part of the country, it's blistering cold and it's going to get colder. Call your friends. It's a very important program today. You're going to be blessed. You're going to be encouraged by my guest, Felecia Marshall, motivational speaker, Grant Me Justice. You stay tuned. Again to another edition of Defining Moments. I'm your host, Larry Nix, and I am delighted that you've joined us today. You're very important. You're so important that God would interrupt whatever I think is important to say, my children are more important than you just going through a normal routine of scheduling guests. I appreciate all of my guests, but I have felt the last several weeks, yea, the last several months, that people are suffering like never before. And there are people out there and companies that get paid millions of dollars to keep up chaos and to start chaos and to make a segment of people's lives miserable, as if just living life is not challenging enough. And I would hope that every week for 60 minutes, you're inspired, you're encouraged, and even challenged to know that you're here not accidentally, incidentally, but you're here on purpose. And the purpose is greater than just making money. Your purpose is kingdom purpose. And my goal is that every week that I would introduce you to someone that would encourage you, that no matter how it looks, how you feel, or even or what the media may be telling you, that number one, God is still in control. He won't relinquish that. And the fact that you woke up this morning is an indication that God has going to meander. My guest is a very special young lady. She's a very precious soul, Marshall. She's an author. She's a non of Grant Me Justice Ministry. She has a book of the same title. She's a motivational and inspirational speaker. The story that she's going to share with you today is going to be extremely compelling, hair-raising. But also, there are those of you who will be able to identify with her story. You feel as if you're in a pit, that you are a victim, and because of your circumstances, you're being victimized even the more. And so hopefully at the conclusion of the program, you will resolve within yourself that God has purposed you. And the fact that you're watching this program or listening to this program, that you will be encouraged that you don't have to walk alone. Hello, Aunt Dean. I always appreciate you joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to read what her publisher actually wrote that I think was very befitting of who she is. I strive to help others turn, and this is in regards to Felecia Marshall. I strive to help others turn their pain into passion. As a motivational speaker, author, and nonprofit founder consultant, I have dedicated my life to helping those who have experienced trauma, loss, and difficulty find their strength and courage. From my own personal experiences, I have come to understand that healing and growth comes through understanding and embracing our stories. I am passionate about teaching others how to use their stories to create positive change in their lives and in the lives of others. Felecia Marshall is a first-time author who seeks to inspire other readers and audience with her story of resilience, courage, and hope. Felicia's latest work is a powerful memoir entitled Grant Me Justice, a mother's journey from murder and mourning to mercy and dancing. This was once the story of a mother's journey coping with the murder of her daughter, the brokenness of the criminal justice system, and ultimately where she is now, finding the strength to forgive. Listen to this: finding the strength to forgive the murderers. Grant Me Justice is her book. And she says unapologetically, after a while, I looked in the mirror and realized, wow, after all those hurts, scars, and bruises, after all of those trials, I really made it through. I did survive. I survived that which was supposed to kill me. So I straightened my crown and walked away like a boss. Felecia Marshall, welcome to Defining Moments. When you hear that, what goes through your mind?
Thank you for having me. Um, it's easier, every time I hear um, my whys behind the organization as well as the book. But it never gets easier. And so just hearing the details of how I got to where I am today as far as my healing process, um, it just takes me back there for a brief second, and then allows me to just see how far God has brought
So let's start at the beginning. You're a daughter, you're a mother, you know, you're a friend, you're an executive manager, an executive at your church, and your whole life you had expectations of success and prosperity and good. I'm going to get married to Prince Charles. All of those dreams and ambitions.
me.
Did you ever in a million years expect that you would be here?
Absolutely. I'm always in awe of God and what God has accomplished through my life. I don't want to take credit for anything that the Lord has done in my life, because I know it has been Him. And when I look back over my life has always been a life of struggle. But God has always shown Himself to be who He is throughout my struggles. And this was just another one of my struggles. And I talk about that in detail in the book.
Austin,
Um,
can you pull that up? Can you pull that up?
It's not letting me
I'm
post the picture.
I'm gonna give some information about the organization, Grant Me Justice, um, and also how people can get in contact with her, uh, and also how they can contact her via her website, her email, her phone number. Because if you log on, then you'll be able to see the book. There it is. There's a copy of her picture, but Grant Me
It won't
Justice.
let me post the
Grant Me Justice. We'll get a copy of the book to you.
so I guess I need to start with this particular thing, the murder of my daughter, because there were a lot of things in my life that have not been pretty, but this thing just
You're minding your business. Let me just set it up
yes,
for you. You're minding your business as most of us are doing. We're going about our business as most of us are. You're being responsible as most of us are. You're doing all the right things as much as you can as most of us are. And all of a sudden, one day, unexpectedly, you get a phone call.
I did a phone call that changed the rest of my life. And the phone call was that my daughter had been shot. And initially, I thought that she was only shot. And in my mind, I thought, well, this is temporary. You know, wounds can be healed. And I never, in that particular moment, thought that she had actually been murdered or had succumbed to her injuries. And just
trip.
getting to the crime scene was the longest ride I've ever been on, because I'm tossing between sanity and insanity, thinking about what could possibly happen, what happened, who was there, who did it, all of the things that I'm sure goes through a person's mind once they hear unexpected news. And but just arriving there on the crime scene was eerie, absolutely eerie feeling.
And I know you must have been, you must have considered an infinite number of faults because one, a parent never imagined that they would have to bury a child. And this, you must be in a nightmarish kind of dream if this is happening to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to stay tuned. The objective is not to rehash, but she has done a wonderful job in a healing kind of therapeutic way in her book, Grant Me Justice. But if you're going through extraordinary pain that you think is unrecoverable, you stay tuned. Felecia Marshall is going to bless you. Hi, Katrina. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. So you find yourself, for those of you, and I'm going to quickly move forward because I want really to be blessed. We really appreciate all of those who drive around the city. We have a lot of delivery drivers who listen to us and people who stream us from all over the country. But I don't want to meander today. I really want to move through this in a healing, respectful kind of way. You're on your way to the murder scene, or you're on your way to the crime scene.
Yeah, I think, none of us, I don't think any of us, and death is something within itself, but I don't think any of us expect our children to be murdered.
Mm.
And so that was just foreign to me, that this could be a possibility in my life that my child was murdered. Um, I just thought this thing was not supposed to be mine, that this is what happens to other people in other areas, people that's, I don't know, but it
Not
wasn't
me.
supposed to happen to
Not
me.
me.
And so going there, the first thing, and all of the people that I've come into contact with since doing this ministry will tell you the same thing. It's the yellow tape and the flashing lights. You'll always remember the flashing lights and the yellow tape. And there are people there that you've never seen before that are witnessing this part of your life play out. And for me, it was one of the most challenging things that I've ever had to do and be a part of is to be a part of a crime scene.
And the crime scene wasn't their crime scene, them or y'all's crime scene to somebody else across town, across the street. It was a crime scene that you were intimately aware of the victim.
Yes. And there were so many people there and it was cold that day. And I'm sure some of it was nerves, but I was trembling like a leaf on a tree, um, waiting to hear or see my baby. And to make a long story short, um, I had to identify her not by photos in my phone, but by tattoos that she had.
I want you to hold that thought. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Call your friends. Call your friends and your family. Welcome back to Defining Moments. You're at the crime scene. You could not identify your daughter with photos on your phone. Pick up there.
Yes, the detectives asked if I had photos, and most parents have photos in their phone. And for me, it was a struggle. The struggle because number one, Lexi didn't take a whole lot of photos, and number two, the photo that I did have did not look like the person that was had been murdered. And so the last resort was for me to stop the detectives and tell the detectives that Lexi had a tattoo, and that tattoo was my name that was written on her arm. And that was the thing that identified her. It's by the tattoo that was on her arm.
So let's go back because prior to this defining moment in your life, what did you expect out of life growing up? And even as a young adult, what did you expect out of life?
Like I said earlier, my life was a struggle. We didn't have food to eat. We didn't have places to live. So our entire life was a struggle. My mom was a single mother who worked at night. We had to basically take care of ourselves during the day. We went to school. I studied, was an honor student, despite of all of the other issues that I faced. My mother was abused throughout my life, and I was sexually abused beginning at the age of 9. So my life was a struggle. And so even though it was a struggle at this point in my life, I had come into the knowledge of Christ, and I was excited about what God was doing in my life. I was teaching at the church, I was over ministries. I was doing all of the things that Christians do. I had the checklist off of all of the things that I was doing. So no, this was not supposed to be my thing. And so my expectation was a life of good, certainly not this thing. And that was one of my biggest questions that I had for the Lord was, how are you going to make this for my good? How can the murder of my child be for my good?
So for those, and I need to move forward real quick, and then I'm gonna come back because there are those that are listening and watching right now. They may not be in the exact scenario that you have had to walk through, but they have a pain equally as horrific and painful. You're here, so that obviously you're surviving. I'm not so sure that you ever get to a point like, okay, done. I've reached it. It's like sanctification. It's a process. You die daily to your flesh, and you accept more of God, and you become less of you and more of God. The representation of who He is. But for those that are suffering, think that they can get through or get out of it. Loss of loved ones, bad decisions, incredible pain. They've been victimized, uh, uh, and they feel like snorting. They feel like shooting it up. They feel like shooting themselves. They feel like shooting somebody. They feel like going on a rampage. Where you are now, the walking it through the valley, Felecia. How would you encourage them?
I would say that this too shall pass. And the thing for me, particularly at first, I was angry with the Lord. I'm like, Lord, why would you? I knew that God was so He could have stopped it. And so for me, I wanted to know why He didn't stop it. I was angry with the Lord. I couldn't pray, couldn't read, couldn't do any of that. And my question was, how can you make this out for my good? And so I encourage those that are going through whatever it is that you're going through to bask in the Master's presence. Get in the presence of God. Allow God to speak. Lay on His lap and allow the Lord to speak to you. This is time, if we're doing all of these great things, sometimes we can't hear from God. But when we get in these places, we have to know that God is close to the brokenhearted.
Mm.
And so recognizing that God is close to me, that even in the midst of this pain, God is with me. He is Emmanuel. He's with us. So even in this pain, and then for God to show me that He lost His son too, and that He could identify with the pain that I was identifying with, and that He cared about all the things that concerned me. That was the thing that brought me the victory.
And so that I know it sounds so foreign to the ears, to the natural ears, and I know it sounds so foreign because they're angry. They're like, if God is God, and if God is God of love, I mean, they're going through a conflict of their minds and their flesh. If God is God, then why does He allow bad things to happen? And you're saying that God didn't create sin; He gives us free will, but He will take our choices and the choices of others and turn them. If you give them to Him, He'll turn them for His glory and our good. And so you're not reading a book. You're listening to a person that has gone through the devastation of getting a phone call, not from a friend, hey, let's go eat, but something very tragic has happened and is going to change the trajectory of your life. Thank you, Pastor Wesley from Vicksburg, Mississippi, from joining us. And thank you, Pastor Stanley James, a wonderful pastor. In fact, he has become my pastor. My wife and I joined his church several weeks ago, True Vine Baptist Church in Brandon, Mississippi. A wonderful, gifted, loving, endearing servant leader pastor. So thank you, Pastor, for joining us. And thank you for joining us as well. Uh, but you're saying that what sustained you is your faith. Even though you're angry and you have questions, Dr. C.J. Rhodes, he's senior pastor of Mount Ham Baptist Church, he says God is big enough to handle you being angry at him.
I think for me, because every aspect of my faith was shaken, because the number one thing I wanted to know for sure was the fact that my baby was in the arms of the Lord.
Wow.
And because that was my prayer. Matter of fact, I had prayed the night before that the Lord would draw my baby closer to him.
Wow.
And I wanted to make sure that my prayer had been answered and that my baby was in the arms of the Lord. And the basis of my faith was shaken in the fact that I believe that once you're in the master's hand, that nothing and no one can snatch you out of it. Despite of what the world sees, that nothing can snatch us out. And so I saw my baby struggle, but I also saw my baby come into the knowledge of Christ. I saw her struggle with her struggles, and I saw it was a spiritual battle. And I saw her on her knees, and I saw her crying out to the Lord, and I saw all of these things that my baby struggled with, and I saw uh, that sometimes she succumbed to pulling her. And so in that, I wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure my baby was. And I struggled with my theology and whether my theology was sound. And I wanted to be assured, number one, that God heard me. My prayer was answered and that my baby was in the bosom of the Lord.
Do you believe that?
Absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely.
So do you believe that as distasteful and as heartening and as hurtful as this has been and is, um, you can accept that this was the will of God?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because without it, is it safe to assume to grant me justice, the ministry, the book, all of the speaking engagements would never have happened?
None of that. None of that would have happened.
And so when this happened, let's move from the scene. What happens next?
Well, of course,
Because I want to get to you birthing your ministry. All right.
well, of course, after leaving the crime scene, you go through the normal processes of family coming to the house, the burial process, and we wanted to do it crime circuit, and so it took a few days in order for us to get the body back. But we went through that process, buried her, and then I was left to myself.
Mm.
And many times when there's a funeral and there's a lot of noise around, and there's a lot of noise around Lexi's death because it was a murder. Um, After everyone had gone back home and left me to myself.
That's when the road met the road.
Yes.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Felecia Marshall, grant me justice. Stay tuned. Um, that's why you need to embrace people after the celebration, after the funeral, after the repast. But even that is necessary that you are alone. Because in your aloneness, that's where you meet God.
Yes. I was left to myself, and in this during this period of time, I was still questioning the Lord. And matter of fact, you mentioned earlier that I worked at a church and have been for 15 years now. But I went to church every day, angry with the Lord, put a smile on my face, and had turmoil going on in my body.
So let me say this: going to church, being a Christian, giving your tithes and offering, does it prevent you from having hardship in your life?
Absolutely not.
That's an erroneous teaching, in,
Yes.
isn't it? That you're not going to have valleys, you're not going to have mountains.
Yeah.
But the difference is, as a Christian, we have an advocate.
Yeah. And the Bible tells us in this world we will have trouble. But it says that he has overcome the
The
world.
world. Yeah.
So, but
Thank you. Just 1 second.
okay.
My guest today is Felecia Marshall. She is author, motivational, inspirational speaker, founder of nonprofit organization, The Book of the Same, Grant Me Justice. If people would like to get a copy of the book, how can they get a copy of the book? Austin, will you put that up again? If people like to get a copy of the book, Grant Me Justice.
You can go to Amazon
Okay.
or Barnes and Noble,
Okay.
where you normally purchase books from. The Audible is not available yet. You can go to my website, which is FeliciaMarshall.com,
Mhm.
and you can go to my publisher's website, which is Energion.com.
If they would like to get in contact with you to speak to their organization or speak to their church, their church group, how can they get in contact with you?
My telephone number is 601-540-2817. My email address is fmarshall@grantmejustice.org.
So you can choose a couple of things. You can choose to stay in your pain and to stay angry and just kind of drift away from God and the church. Or you can be determined, I don't like it. I've got to be honest with myself, but I know I've got to walk through this pain. All right. Now, I've had several clinical therapists on the program, and sometimes we victimize the victim. You just need to have more faith. All right. So Lex is in a better place. Child, it's time to get over it. But we heal differently, don't we? Every experience is different. Even though it may be the same outwardly, the emotions are different. So I would say to those that are listening and watching that for people that go through hardship and pain, let us not victimize them more by assuming that there's a beginning and there's an end, emphatic date that, listen, you should be over it now. And if you really trust in God, then God will bless you and he'll handle it. Yeah, he'll do all of that. But grieving is a natural process. It's a demonstration of your love. And so now you're in a point of you celebrated her life and now you're all alone. That could have gone two ways. You could have gotten closer to the Lord, or you could have pushed back and been stooped in your anger. And that's where I want to get people from today. Because there are people that have been hurt by the church and feel that they've been abandoned by God and they're hurt. And I want to help those. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining us.
I think for me, prior to me losing my child to murder, I had a surface level theology.
Wow.
And I think I read the word, I taught the word, I did all these church things, but I hadn't gone into the Holy of Holies. And I think many times, we have a surface level theology and we don't enter into the Holy of Holies. And I think for me, had I not lost my child, I would not have the deeper relationship that I needed.
And this is what I say, and just to define what you mean, particularly to the novice ear, there are folk that are in the building called church, but they're not in the presence of the Lord.
Absolutely.
There's a difference in being on the premises than being in the presence of the Lord. You can be on the premises in the building, but church is not in you. Christ is not in you.
One of the things that was powerful during the time that I was grieving the initial time of my grieving, because I'm still grieving, was laugh when I could laugh and cry when I needed to cry. That gave me the freedom
Oh, that's good.
to grieve my baby. That it was okay. There wasn't a time limit. I wasn't gonna make myself sick by crying. You know, oftentimes people tell us that you should get over it. You know, you're gonna get sick if you keep crying. But it gave me the freedom that when there were times that I could laugh to laugh, because there was gonna be many times that I was gonna be crying. So they gave me the freedom.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Repeat what you just said. That's profound.
Laugh when you can laugh and cry when you need to cry.
And give yourself permission to do both.
Both. To do both. Once I was left to myself, then it was me and God, you know, questioning again my theology and trying to see this one question: how will you make this for my good? How will you work this out for my good? Because I couldn't see. And let me just, you know, give you the details of my daughter. My daughter was 26 years old when she was murdered. She was killed with an AK-47 assault rifle,
Gee.
bullet wound that entered her heart. I couldn't see that being my good, and me seeing my baby in that way being for my good. And so I still had to live, though. I still had to go through this process of all of this pain. And in that, even in the midst of that grief, there were 3 people that were convicted for my daughter's murder. One received 15, one 12, and one's walking free today. Going through that criminal process, that took 3 years of my life. And so going through that process and grieving at the same time, the Lord showed himself to be God, even in the midst of that, to the point where I was able to see the judicial system in a whole different way. And the mother of one of the defendants sitting right next to me. And that had to have been God. How could these 2 mothers, both one for the defendant and one for the victim, end up sitting side by side, both seeking justice for their children? Both. Because both of us, if that had been my boy, I would have been there and I would have wanted him to have justice. The justice that the judicial system promises. And oftentimes that does not happen.
Boy, you're sitting beside the mother of one of the accused.
Yes.
So what happens? Because your book, the sub read says you're dealing with murder, the victim. The other part is mercy.
Yes. Well,
Now that sounds so foreign. Mercy. No, because normally when you've been victimized and the episode is so egregious, your flesh would say electric chair, death sentence, I'll take care of it myself.
well, what the Lord showed me was that this grace that God has shown me was even for the individuals that were responsible for my child's death. That this grace that we talk about, you know, this salvation that we talk about, is not just for those of us that have done things that may not be quite as bad as a murder, but it's also for the murder.
Wait a minute, Felicia. Now you get into the nitty gritty of it now. You mean that the same grace that the Lord has extended to me in my life, He wants me to extend it even to my enemy
Absolutely.
and the ones who have come in and wrecked my life?
Absolutely.
Don't you say that to us?
Yes.
Because now, because there's some right now that want to take a bat and hit or cut the radio off. They're still angry.
The thing is that those of us that believe, we have to believe the Bible from Genesis to Revelations. And we believe that, then we believe also that God's grace is also for sin. And murder is a sin. And yes, we're supposed to seek justice here on this side. But God is a God of justice. And that same justice that God gives us to become believers, He extends that same justice to the very people that murdered murdered my daughter.
And I'm gonna tell you now. I mean, let's be real. It feels good to hate,
Mhm.
particularly when
Easy.
it's easy to hate,
Mhm.
and it feels good to the flesh, and it's easy. Listen, you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you, or I'm gonna make sure you get hurt. It's easy. It feels justifiable. You know, uh, it feels reciprocal. But that's not the theology of God, is it?
And it's you know it's hard to digest. God has to reveal those things to us. And let me say this: there are a lot of people that have lost children to violence that do not feel the same way that I do, and I understand that. But this is what the Lord showed to me, and that brought me into a better relationship with Him, because I feel like again that my theology was surface level when He showed me exactly what Christ did on the cross. He died for me, but He also died for those three people that were responsible for my child's murder. And so that brought me into a deeper relationship with Him. And when I'm able to understand and grasp just what grace is and just what grace does, it put me at a place of awe of God in all of the ways that He has drawn us to Himself, including my baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, Felecia Marshall, Grant Me Justice is her book. You can find it on Amazon. We have information on the screen for those of you that are live streaming us. Certainly get a copy. It reveals a lot and it was a hard write. We'll tell you why. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And so you're sitting beside one of the mothers. Take us take us through the sentencing process. And I want you to take us to a place that you birthed. God says, it's not, this is not all. It's not over. Now you'll understand fuller why I've taken you through this process.
Yes, well, one of the mothers was sitting next and she was weeping. I was like, I don't know her. So I know it wasn't anyone that was related to Lexi. And so I asked, I said, is that your son? And she said, yes, ma'am.
Wow.
That's my son. He was 21 years old. And I said, I'm Lexi's mom. She said, I know who you are. And I embraced her. I just hugged her and told her it was going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
You embraced the mother of one of the
Yes,
that was accused of shooting your daughter
yes,
with an AK assault style rifle.
yes,
And you embraced her
yes.
and told her.
It's going to be okay.
Okay.
Yes, because neither one of us asked to be there. You know, me as Lexi's mom, I didn't ask to be there. She didn't either. She was on her job, you know, when her son committed this crime. And she was hurting for her child just like I was hurting for mine. So when I went before the judge, I went before the judge seeking justice for my baby. But at the same time, when I went before the judge, I also sought mercy for the defendant.
You told the judge, I understand there are consequences and laws, but also I want you to have mercy.
I told the judge that um, I wanted justice for my baby because my baby was murdered. I also told the judge that did not want my son to plea, take a plea deal for something that he did not do.
I want you to hold that thought. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Felecia Marshall, a motivational speaker, author, um, founder of nonprofit of the same, Grant Me Justice, is on the program today, chronicling her journey through um, witnessing and having to deal with, and then sharing the outcomes of her daughter being murdered. And so you went before the judge and shared with the judge you expect for the justice system to work,
Absolutely.
comma, a semicolon, also, but what?
Yes. Also, that this young man, if he did not commit this crime, that I did not want him to plead guilty to something that he did not do. And I don't think with plea deals that it gives an opportunity for the truth to be told. If you plea out, then no details are given. You never hear the details of the crime. So if that's the case, how do we know that that's the truth?
Did friends and family members thought that you had absolutely lost your mind?
Absolutely, and still do. But it's the truth. If that had
Because
been my boy,
yeah,
I have a son.
Yeah.
And if that had been my son, I would want him. I would not want him to plead to something that he did not do.
and also as and of course you got to get the book, as if you didn't suffer enough pain. You write about it in your book. So I'm only telling what you've written about. You share that you had to go through another pain with your mother because your mother was at odds.
Yes, my mom passed away 2 years after Lexi's death. Matter of fact, on the same day that we buried the date that we buried Lexi. I did an interview regarding the trial and um, talking about the fact that I had gone to one of the plea deals that I hadn't shared with my family because I didn't. I wanted it to be secret. I didn't want anybody else to know all of the details that was happening for fear that this was a God thing, and I knew my family wouldn't have understood it that way. And Mama was hurt that I did not invite her to the plea deal, and she got so upset until she had a heart attack.
Um, so, boy, that's pain on top of pain.
Mhm.
At one point, did you think that you were gonna lose it?
Um, say that I never thought I would lose mine, but I did wrestle with God. Wrestle with all of the details that pertain to my life.
Looking back, how do you look at the whole journey?
That maturing that I wouldn't have faced, I don't think, had I not gone through this thing. I would have still been the surface level Christian that I was. I would have still been checking off all of the check boxes, and I wouldn't have ever been in the presence of God. I wouldn't have ever laid my head in his lap and wept. I wouldn't have told him about all of my hurts and all of the ways that I felt like um, I was struggling, and even my Christianity and what that looked like, and my obedience to Him, and all of the questions. I don't think I would have ever gotten to that place had I not lost my baby. Now I'm not excited about losing my baby, but I am so excited about being in the perfect will of God. And I don't think I could have gotten there had I not lost my baby.
So let's leapfrog. And many of you are texting me. It's impossible for me to get up to all of the questions that you're asking me to ask her. And of course, I'm sure if her schedule permits that she'll come back. Will you do that?
Absolutely.
Um, but how was Grant Me Justice birth, and why was it birth?
Well, really, I wanted Lexi's story to be told. And so Grammy Justice, the organization, actually started. I just wanted to go and interview families and them tell me their story. I wanted them to know who my child was. And I wanted other families to have the opportunity to tell who their children were. Because, like I said, everybody goes to their separate parts of the world while we're still struggling with the loss. And so I wanted people to know that Lexi loved LSU basketball and she liked lima beans. And I wanted them to know that she was an avid drummer and that she liked to sing. I wanted them to know that she was silly at times. And I wanted them to know that she would give you the shirt off of her back. And so I wanted people to know those details of my baby. And I didn't want them to forget number 14. See, we are assigned numbers to our children when they're dead, when they're murdered.
Wow.
They're homicide number 14, homicide number 15, whatever that number is. But I wanted people to know who number 14 was. And I wanted to give other families the opportunity to tell who their children were too. So initially, this thing was about telling stories. I went to my first interview, which was a family in Prentiss, Mississippi, the Abram family. And once I left that interview, the trajectory of Grant Me Justice changed. God said then, this is much more than stories. This particular family's dad had found his son shot with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. He had taken the son to the hospital, and the mother would come later. The dad talks about him talking to his son all the way to the hospital. And just imagine the damage that was done to someone with this shot with 2 wounds to the head. Just imagine that damage, and this is your child. And you're taking this child to the hospital for care, and you know he's not alive. And just to hear the mom go back and forth from sanity to insanity, from the present tense to past tense, as if he's going to walk in the door. And how she smiled when she talked about it. She talked about his dimples and how charismatic he was. And she smiled through that. And then the next few minutes, she was crying and weeping. And when I left that day, the Lord said, this is much more than just telling stories. This is much more than that. And so, grant me justice, the name comes from Luke chapter 18, verse 1 through 8, where the widow goes before the unjust judge seeking justice. And then, Luke does not tell us what type of justice this particular widow was seeking, but it does say that she was persistent. And when we go before these judges, as I did, I went 4 times before the judge, and we're seeking justice for our children. This particular scripture resonated with me, and that's how the name Grant Me Justice came to be. But then there were things that I knew that I needed during this process that I did not have. I needed advocacy. I need somebody to tell me about this process. I had no idea what I was doing. I had never been in a courtroom before. So everything about it was foreign. And so I knew that somebody needed to be there to advocate on behalf of families, the victim. Now you would think that because you are victimized that you would have the upper hand, but that is not the case. Victims don't have the upper hand. The court systems are built around and for the defendant. As a matter of fact, they have Miranda rights when they are arrested. But for a victim, we have to ask for our rights. We have to sign, request our rights. And so I knew that most victims don't know that. And I didn't. And I know most victims didn't know that. So I knew we needed to advocate. I knew we needed to tell people about what's happening and all of the uh, chaos that's caused by murder and how many effects, layers of effect a murder has. I knew that had to be it. And then I knew that there was direct support like counseling. And I knew people would need, if you imagine a life already chaotic, and then you pile a murder and a criminal justice system on top of that. If you already don't have your lights paid and you pile all of those things on top of it, your light's still not going to be paid. And you're still trying to grieve and seek justice. So, and then we have direct support. And so this ministry, thank God, I mean, God has done some amazing things through Grant Me Justice, the organization. We serve families in this city and around the state and some out of the state with providing these resources for families that have lost loved ones to violence. And it is a beautiful thing to see.
So if people are found in this whirlwind, in this chaotic, um, you know, roundabout, can they contact your organization that you help walk them through? Again, how can they contact you?
My telephone number is 601-540-2817. You can go to the website, www.grantmejustice.org, and you can actually see some of the work that we're doing, and you can send in a request for someone to give you a contact.
You had no idea 10 years ago
No.
that you would be here,
Oh, absolutely.
but you're here.
Mhm.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Felecia Marshall, Grant Me Justice, is with us. We'll be right back. And so now that you have the ministry uh, founded, how did the book come about?
To be
And
honest,
and it took a while for it to come about. It's not like you woke up, oh, I'm going to write a book. Because probably 10 years ago, if someone said, you're going to write a book, you would have responded and said,
I don't know, I'm not. But it took a little over 2 years for me to actually complete the project because I wanted the project to be a good read. I wanted it to be glorifying to the Lord. And I never thought that I had the skills to do it. And so the process took longer than I thought because I thought, I see people putting books out all the time. I said, sure, I can do this. But it was a grueling process. And I started really wanting to tell Lex's story.
I want you to hold that because I want really people to get this. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I trust that you're being blessed. And so you're inspired to start the ministry, Grant Me Justice, for reasons that you just shared, to walk with people as they um, walk through the justice system that has many flaws to it, but it's the only system that we have to get justice. But there are many areas that it needs to be remedied. There are many areas that needs to be remedied inside the system, and the victim does not become victimized even more. But then also, God inspired you to write a book.
Yes. And I wanted to write again, I wanted people to know the story, all the things that happened with Lexi's life, her death, and the criminal justice system. And I actually started the book really wanting to do um, introduction into the criminal justice system, what it looks like for the victim, what it looks like for the defendant. But as I began to write Lexi's story, I knew that I couldn't adequately tell her story without telling my own because we were entwined. And so I then had to go and revisit some of um, all of the things that hurt me the most. I had to revisit those things and put those things in the book because those things brought me to the mother that I was. And it brought me to how I mothered. It brought me to even, how I became into the knowledge of Christ and what that looks like, some of my flaws and some of my reflections back on my life prior to me getting into the Holy of Holies. And so, and then just pointing people, the book actually points people to Christ. Despite of all of the things that I've gone through my life, I would not be Felicia Marshall had I not gone through those things and had not God been carrying me all the way.
I'm about to make an assumption here, and the assumption is, how do you walk uh, with the perspective that you don't victimize yourself, that you don't point the finger at yourself? Because I'm sure that there were many days, months, and even years that you looked at yourself and said, "What could I have done?" or "What I didn't do." And now the enemy wants to have a field day with that. You're the fault. You're the blame. It's your fault. You're the blame. You're inadequate. This is what you didn't do. It's your fault. And there are those parents and even single people and just people that are looking now and they've made mistakes and they're blaming themselves. They're victimizing themselves.
Yes, and I have to admit, as a parent, I messed, I messed up several times. And I did wrestle with that, particularly when I lost Lexi. I wanted to know that I was a good mother to her, and being able to reflect on the type of mother that I was, I had to admit to the fact that sometimes I did the best that I could, but I did mess up. And even with that, God is able to use all of my flaws, to be Felicia Marshall. And if it wasn't for my flaws, I wouldn't be who I am. And helped me to see that I'm in need of a power deeper than it. I am helpless on the Lord. And the fact that He didn't leave me here to do it by myself. He wants me to put and trust all my cares on Him. And so, but yeah.
So for those that are watching and those that are listening, I'm going to go through a plethora of things. They feel inadequate.
Mm.
They feel that they've been victimized,
Mm.
or they even feel that they were the victim, or they victimized others, rather. They feel inadequate again. They feel that life has passed them by.
Mm.
They feel that they've done so much evil
Mm.
and dark things,
Mm.
bad decisions. It is impossible for God to use them, to redeem them, to give them a fresh start, and there's any good that can come out of what they've done, who they are, or what they're thinking about. How would you respond to that?
I would say that God can get glory out of your story.
Mm.
And
I'm gonna write that one down.
once you read the book, I go into detail of all of the ways that I failed, not only myself, my family, and God. And but God can take what is seen as the foolishness of the world, and God can take that thing, and He can make it work out for your good and His glory. Put it in that, and I keep saying that because I know me. I know me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You see me dressed up here today. But if you are able to peek into my story, which you will have opportunity to if you pick up the book, and see how God has used my low down self
Oh,
for His glory.
talk.
How God has taken all of the ways that I was selfish, and all the ways I manipulated, and all of the ways I cheated, and all the ways that I did low down dirty stuff, and God is using that for His glory. It's the but God part. I did all of these things, but God. It's the but God part that matters.
I need to pause because you're not finished. You need to keep talking to her. It's the but God. Let me tell you something. When I hear that but God, I hear while we were yet sinners.
When I think about um, the goodness of the Lord, and you hear people say this all the time. When I think about the goodness of the Lord and all He has done for me, my soul cries out, hallelujah. And the reason why I can say that is because I know me. I know my story. You guys hearing now about the death of my daughter, but you wouldn't have been hearing anything about my story had you not heard about the death of my daughter. But I tell you that when I say that God is entwined in all of the areas of my life, and my life has been from poverty to abuse to molestation to um, cheating on my husband to stealing to you name it. That's my story. And the thing that gets God the glory is when we shed light on it and tell people this is not me. This is God in me. If left to myself, this is who I be. But God, this is what God has done. And I give God all the glory for all of the things that the Lord has done in my life. I bless His name. I'm so glad to be in the presence of God and to know that it's God that's caring, that I'm no longer left to me.
So there are those who are breathing today. God is giving you another chance.
Mm.
I'm not going to go through the routine of closing this program out. I want you to take the next 50 seconds and just close the program out because there's somebody that's hanging on right now.
For those of you that are holding on right now, if you lost a loved one, despite of how you've lost a loved one, I want you to know, number one, that God is close to the brokenhearted. And I want you to know that you are not alone, that you can cast all your cares, every last one of them, on Him. I also want you to know that He's there to catch every tear that falls from your eye. I also want you to know that your God is silent or he's not there. I want you to know that God is real. He's real. He's present. He's not afar off. He's a God that you can tell everything about and tell him all about it. He's real. Allow him to be real in your life. Press in. Press into the Holy of Holies. Go to the place where a lot of people don't have the opportunity to go. The veil has been torn and you have direct access.
See you next week.